morning on the first day of the week as we begin this week with a message which we have promised that we are going to proclaim. This message which we said we want to find out what is in the scriptures from the year of 1833 or from the call of William Miller. So it's a wonderful morning and we have good sunshine which is now fading away. I think it's gonna rain, which is a good blessing. So we are going to meet in this study today while we are studying the book of Zechariah chapter 1 verse 1. And as we are going to read, may we call upon the Holy Spirit to be upon us, to pour up the Spirit so we can have a spirit of understanding, of wisdom, of tact in these days where the world has gone so dark, so away from God, but to have a people who are longing and zealous to understand the will of God as we prepare for the soon coming kingdom. So we're going to read from Zechariah chapter 1, starting from verse 1. Yeah?
In the 8th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord unto Zechariah.
So we start with an introduction of when that presentation, when that information came to the prophet Zechariah. And it's 8th month, and you know for sure it's not August. It's not August. The 8th month is not August, but this is the 8th biblical month that this word came unto Zechariah in the time of the reign of the 2nd year of Darius. So as we are studying, why are we being told it was in the 2nd year of Darius? So that we know that Darius succeeded the Babylonian Empire. So after Babylon came the king Darius on the Medo-Persia. Cyrus and Darius were ruling those two empires, which were as silver in the chronology of the statue of Daniel chapter 2. So now we are being told there came a reformatory message to this prophet Zechariah. And why would that message come to Zechariah? Why would God raise this prophet on that year? We want to understand the reason why that if we go to Ezra chapter 4 verse 24, we will see why Zechariah had been raised in that year and why God would raise this prophet on the 8th month and give this prophet the reformatory message. Let's read from verse 24. Ezra chapter 4 verse 24.
Then ceased the work of the house of God which was at Jerusalem.
So you see, they were supposed to rebuild Jerusalem when they were coming from Babylon. But that work of rebuilding Jerusalem had ceased. So if any work in our movement is stopped, God will raise somebody, raise a prophet to restart that work. Because if you are going to read from verse 2, let's hear.
Ezra 4.
Right. God, where it says the Lord had ceased, so displeased. Verse 2.
Of Ezra.
Of Zechariah.
Oh, Zechariah.
Zechariah chapter 1.
The Lord hath been sore displeased with your fathers.
Right. So you see, you get now why God was so displeased with these people. When they came from Babylon, they were supposed to rebuild Jerusalem, but the work had ceased. So God was so displeased with what they had done to stop the work of reformation. So a prophet was raised. When the work of reformation is stopped, a prophet is raised. Now we have unto 2,300 days shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So all these times which were deleted, which were changed during dark ages, we see Sister White being raised to put back these times from 2,300 days when they expired it was in 1844. So Sister White was raised to rebuild or to bring back these times and laws. But the first time that she physically changed was the day from Sunday to Sabbath. But there are so many times that had been changed and so many laws that had been changed. But if we do not continue this reformation, then surely God will raise prophets to do this, like it was with Zechariah. They had ceased rebuilding Jerusalem, and then Zechariah was raised because God was not pleased with them just stopping at where they are. So God was so unhappy with the builders, these builders. So read up to 6, yeah?
Therefore, say thou unto them,
right?
Thus saith the Lord of hosts,
right?
Turn ye unto me,
right?
saith the Lord of hosts, and I will turn unto you, saith the Lord of hosts.
Right?
Be ye not as your fathers, unto whom the former prophets have cried, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Turn ye now from your evil ways,
right?
and from your evil doings.
Right.
But they did not hear, nor hearken unto me, saith
What
the
was
Lord.
this evil way? The evil way was from them not continuing with reformation. It's evil because somebody changed the times and laws, and then you just change the day. That's it. You are stuck. You are not doing anything. So God will raise a prophet to continue the reformation, because it says, unto 2,300 days shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Surely, if the day was changed, so we have to change even these feasts. They were changed in the Dark Ages. They were removed. The beast who was changing the feast is triumphing if we just stop. And this is an evil way in front of God. So we have understood there why a prophet is raised is when God said, your father stopped reforming, and God raised Zechariah. Now, are we still reforming, or we are stuck? We are now waiting to go when we haven't even changed all that was changed during the Dark Ages. All these festivals were changed, and instead people are saying no, the festivals were nailed to the cross, but they were changed by the Dark Ages. If you go to Good News Bible, you see what exactly was changed in the Dark Ages. Daniel chapter 7 verse 25 in Good News. Read exactly what was changed, because just 10 times and laws in the King James, times and laws, but which times were changed? It's not the Sabbath only. It's all these times were changed. Let's hear from Good News Bible, Daniel chapter 7 verse 25. What does it say?
He will speak against the supreme God and oppress God's people.
Right?
He will try to change their religious laws and festivals.
What was changed? The religious laws and festivals in the Dark Ages. So we only changed, Sister White only changed the Sabbath to Sunday, Sunday to Sabbath. But what about these religious festivals? Who is going to do that? And now we are stuck. We are saying we are ready to hop in the cloud. But God is saying, no, if you are stuck like what it was with your forefathers, He will raise a prophet to continue with the reformation, changing them back to what they were before. Instead, what are we proclaiming? They were all nailed to the cross. It's a sure sign that they will never be changed back. When God said, unto 2,300 days, these should be back. The sanctuary should be cleansed, meaning they should be back. That's why Sister White started with the Sabbath. And next, it should all the feasts one by one be changed. But if then we proclaim and say they were all nailed to the cross, when they were there in the Dark Ages, 538 AD, 1798 AD, that's Dark Ages, well after the cross. So then it means we are proclaiming to say we are stuck. We are no longer going to reform, and God will raise a prophet. This is the reason why He raises prophets. So let's go now and see the message which Zechariah was being given as a reformation. For him to start a reformation, it's starting from verse 7.
Verse 7. Zechariah.
Chapter 1, verse 7.
Upon the 24th day of the 11th month.
Now, just that only tells us that God is going along with His calendar, Because here he will name what the name of the 11th month, what it is. What is the name there in that same verse?
Which is the month Sabbath.
Right. So we should know which one then is month Sabbath. Because the times were changed. When the times were changed in the Dark Ages, that's where we introduced this Gregorian calendar, which is not going along with the Bible. So, but now God is talking about the 11th month, which is the month of Sabbath. Then where do we get that month Sabbath if we had not reformed these times in our religious circles? The times are still there according to the Dark Ages, and people are ready to walk in the cloud when they don't even know where Sabbath is. Sabbath, which is the 11th month, according to that verse. So we should know from Nisan, which is Abib, all the 12 months from the Bible. He said the Nisan, Ayah, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishri, Sheshvan, Kislev, Shevat. That's the 11th month. Tebet, Sabbath, which is 11th month, and then Adar, the 12th month. And be knowing even where to get these times in the Bible. Because when God says in the month Sabbath, you are lost. You don't even know. For you to have, just a recap, for us to know, let's go back to the times. Let me just give you, so that when you research on your own, you see these names and there are verses where to get them. There is no January, there is no August, there is no... All these times were introduced in Dark Ages, but now we are ready to go without knowing even the months, their names, when God is talking about them and saying this is the 11th month. Just a quick rundown to show which month comes in which verse. I'll just give you write down and you research on your own. So the month of Abib, obvious we know in Exodus chapter 12 verse 2 is talking about the first month of the year, and it is identified as Abib in Exodus chapter 13 verse 4. You walked out in the month Abib, or in Esther chapter 3 verse 7, right? That's the first month. On your own, you will read those verses. Now the month Ayah, sometimes it's written in other names, but it was named as Ayah when they walked out of Egypt. In the whole Bible, you won't find these other months that we're talking about, whether it's June or whatever. If you have any verse, show me which one is saying June. But these are the names in the Bible showing which is this month and their names. Because we have met the 11th month as Sabbath in the verse we are reading. So we are blank, it's all Greek, but we should be acquainted with these names. So the second month, which is Ayah, you find, or sometimes it's called Ziph, which is Z-I-F, Ziph, which is 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 1. You write it in your notes. And then the third month, which is Sivan. We have passed through the third month, which is 1 Kings, Esther, the book of Esther, chapter 8 verse 9. That's Sivan. You find the month of Sivan. And then the month of Tammuz, which is in Jeremiah chapter 39 verse 2. You go and research on your own. And then the fifth month, which is Av, which is in Numbers chapter 33 verse 38. And then the sixth month, which is Elul. I said Nisan, Ayah, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul. So we have said there's Av there, which is Numbers chapter 33 verse 38. And then there is Elul, which is Nehemiah chapter 6 verse 15. And then there is the month Tishri, which is the month that we go for the tabernacle. Is the seventh month of the year, tabernacle, somewhere about October there. Tishri, or the other name of Tishri, is Ethanim, which is found in 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 2. Then we have the month called Heshvan or Sheshvan, or in other words, in other Bibles find it as Bul, B-U-L. That's in 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 38. And then we have the ninth month, which is Kislev. Kislev is found in Zechariah chapter 7 verse 1. And then we have the month of Tevet, which is the 10th month. 10th month, which is in Esther chapter 2, verse 16. Right? You are writing down. And if I'm quick, you can run down the video if you get them one by one. And then we have the month of Shevan, Shevad, the one that we are reading about in Zechariah. We found it in Zechariah chapter 1, verse 7. And then we have the last month, which is the 12th month, around March there. It's the 12th month, which is the month of Adar or Adar, which is in Esther chapter 9, verse 1. I have given you all these verses for you to go and check these months which were changed and see exactly why were they changed, so that you got lost, so that you just worship like a butterfly. You don't even know what is happening in the Bible. Now, God is saying on the 11th month, which is Shevan. Let's go back to the verse of Zechariah chapter 1, verse 7.
Verse 7.
Mm-hmm.
Upon the 24th day of the 11th month,
right,
which is the month Sabbath,
right,
in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord unto Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo the prophet, saying, I saw by night, and behold, a man riding upon a red horse, and he stood among the myrtle trees that were in the bottom, and behind him were the red horses, speckled and white.
Now, so what is this man? This man is saying, I saw by night. Yeah, so we are going to, this is a prophecy. We are going to study this prophecy. I saw by night, and behold, a man riding upon a red horse. Yeah? And he stood among the myrtle tree that were in the bottom, and behind him were there red horses, speckled and white. Right? So these horses were red, speckled and white. So someone will say, so what is God trying to say there? So it needs interpretation. So for us to interpret, it shouldn't be private. It should be coming from the Bible. So for us to get a meaning of what this verse is, we have to go further and start with verse 9 of that same chapter. Will tell us exactly what is happening there.
Then said I, O my Lord, what are these? And the angel that talked with me said unto me, I will shew thee what these be. And the man that stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, These are they whom the Lord had sent to walk to and fro through the earth. And they answered the angel of the Lord that stood among the myrtle trees and said, We have walked to and fro through the earth, and behold, all the earth sitteth still, and it is at rest.
Right. So you see, there's one scenario with those. It says, in verse 9, Then said I, O my Lord, what are these? And the angel that talked with me said unto me, I will show thee what these be. And the man that stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, These are they whom the Lord had sent to walk to and from through the earth. And they answered the angel of the Lord that stood among the myrtle trees, and said, We have walked to and fro through the earth, and behold, all the earth sitteth still, and is at rest. That's where we want to spend our morning, understanding this parable or this prophecy, where the earth was inspected by these red and speckled horses. And these horses, they've gone throughout the whole earth and seen that the earth sat still and is at rest. Have you seen that? What is it? What are they up to? What do they want us to know? Because we can't just hop into heaven without knowing this. We have to know that. So when we are studying, we are prying into what God has preserved for us, for our knowledge. Someone has to interpret that thing so that we understand. If it is a message of Reformation by Zechariah, and he's saying, we have walked through the whole earth is at still. They are all sitting at still as if the world will go on and on and on. This is what happened. Now, but want to understand, there's one scenario there. Since these horses are sent by the Lord to walk through, did you see that? Yeah. So let's read from 1 TG 11.5. 11.5.2. We started since the horses, yeah.
Since the horses are sent by the Lord to walk to and fro through the earth, and since they have the ability to speak, all this very obviously reveals that the horses are symbolical of the Lord's messengers, of those whom he sends to the nations.
Right. So the horses are speaking. That we heard them saying we have walked through and for in the whole earth. They are speaking. They've got mouth. So definitely these are not animals. These are messengers. They are able to speak because they were sent. We see the angel of the Lord saying, is standing behind the metal tree and asking. The horses are answering. We have walked through everywhere. So these are messengers. This is what we have been told. These are messengers. Right. Proceed that the red and speckled.
The red, speckled, and white, several species of the horses, depict a group of servants of varied races and nationalities.
Right. That's one thing. We have a time where we have a group of servants or of messengers preaching messages of different nationalities. Yeah? Combination of different, so that when you say one is coming from Zimbabwe, one is coming from Zambia, one is coming from Tanzania, one is coming from Uganda, Canada, Filipino, America, everywhere, combined as red and speckled and white horses. Did you hear that? There are colors there. That's why we are being told that since the red, speckled, and white, several species of horses, depicting a group of many nationalities. Have you seen that? God is telling us there is, in the last days, he has seen a group of nationalities who are together, pondering over a same message. It has never happened, because when they walked out of Egypt, it was one nationality, Israelites. They were not combined. He had a servant, Moses, leading his people. But now, he is talking here of a group of nationalities, all proclaiming, being led by same movement. Yeah, this is what, if it is not meaning that to you, what could it be meaning? What could it be meaning? So, read on there. The horses,
therefore, cannot be taken to symbolize either the Hebrew servants
or
Zechariah's day.
On Zechariah's day, they can't be referring to those because they were only one nationality. Even on Zechariah's day, we didn't have such workers, where workers were combined together of different nationalities. We didn't have that. We had only one nation, the Israelites, or the Hebrews. So Zechariah doesn't mean the people who were there in his time. Right?
Okay.
Right? Having fulfilled.
Having fulfilled their mission, the horses reported that they have walked to and fro through the earth, and that in spite of it, the earth is sitting still and at rest.
Right.
Doing nothing about it.
They were just sitting, enjoying life, doing nothing. Right? So the red horses or the servants, they walked through the whole earth, and what did they see? Nobody doing anything. If there was a message. When there is a message, they're seeing people doing nothing. Right? And
since it is a known fact that in Zechariah's day, the message bearers were all Jews, a people of one race and one nation, the symbolism is positively applicable to a day in which God appoints evangelists of various races and nationalities, whom he sends to and fro through the earth to all nations.
Right. We have seen why there are red horses, speckled and white horses, all together, running together to and fro. That one is a very, very concrete answer to that verse. Right? Right? All these
positive identifications clearly point out that the horses represent the first day Adventists.
We start with the first day Adventists. That's why I say this Reformation is starting from 1833. That we are seeing in Zechariah chapter 1. Now there's the first, because why are we saying they are the first reformers? You will find that they are the first reformers because when the Christian church was invaded by paganism, God only raised Martin Luther up to those other ones to reform to the times and laws which were being changed in the Dark Ages. But now, when he started with William Miller, he was starting that Reformation. He is the one now who read Daniel chapter 8, verse 14, that unto 2,300 days shall the sanctuary be cleansed. That's where he started the Advent movement. So that's where we are identifying these red horses from William Miller. If that is enough for us to understand Zechariah chapter 7, Zechariah chapter 1, what he's talking about, then we'll proceed. Now, read on.
All these positive identifications clearly point out that the horses represent the first day Adventists who arose between the years 1833 and 1844, and who then fulfilled this symbolical prophecy by proclaiming the second advent of Christ to every Christian mission. To every Christian mission world over, but having confused the cleansing of the sanctuary in Daniel 8 verse 14.
Of course, he confused it. The event, he said it was the coming of Christ on earth, and yet it was the going of Christ into the Holy of Holies. So he confused that event, but he was accurate in the timing. The timing of 2,300 days started in 1844, though he confused the event, and there was a disappointment. Right? Right?
The purification of the church, the work of the judgment, harvest, by separating the wheat and the tares, the good fish from the bad, the wise virgins from the foolish, the sheep from the goats.
Right. Let's proceed on where he says, as Daniel's prophecy.
Okay. As Daniel's prophecy of chapter 8, namely the 2,300 days, pointed out the judgment work was to commence in 1844 AD. But as it was mistakenly understood that the world was to come to an end instead, they were greatly disappointed when the set date came and nothing happened.
Right.
So it was that as the set date approached, they returned from their mission fields and full of confidence that they had finished their mission, that they had walked to and fro through the earth, and that there was time no longer, that the world was to end.
Right. So here, they had all sold their things, land, everything, abandoned, waiting for the coming of Christ. And they said, we have done everything, we have finished. They worked their blood vessels out to the last minute. And when they saw everything, nothing happened. And even instead, the world was just still. So these are the ones who said, we have walked through the whole earth and nothing has happened. Nothing, they worked, nothing happened. When the date and time came, Christ didn't come. These are the ones proclaiming in Zechariah chapter 1, verse 7. But we will proceed. We want to know how we come in then. Right, let's read on.
Concerning the scope of their work, the great controversy, page 368, has this to say. The writings of Miller and his associates were carried to distant lands.
This is how they were working. Yeah?
Wherever missionaries had penetrated in all the world, were sent the glad tidings of Christ's speedy return. Far and wide spread the message of the everlasting gospel.
Right?
Fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come.
And this is how these horses, they thought the work is done. But listen, if you go to Revelation 14, that is the first angel's message. So they expected Christ to come after the first angel's message. You see how lost they were. That was the first angel's message. We still have 4 more angels' messages, and they thought they had finished. They got it wrong. If they understood William Miller was the one referred to in Revelation 14, verse 6 to 7, and they were also able to read the whole chapter of Revelation 14 until all 5 messages coming. But look where they got it wrong. They just took the first angel's message and then said, we are done. Christ should come. Now, what about us? We took up to the 3rd, and we ignored the other 2 more. And we are saying we are done also. So we shouldn't repeat those mistakes that these guys did, because they did not finish the whole chapter of Revelation 14 to find the angels who are 5. They thought the angels just 1, and then they were waiting for Christ to come. And we are also seeing the angels is just the 3rd. On verse 9, it's the 3rd angel's message in Revelation 14. And we are saying we are done. And those who go up to verse 17 to find the 2 more which come. Verse 14 to 15 is another one. Verse 16 to 17 is another one. Those are the ones who come and say, now we are waiting for the coming of Christ. But you can't wait anyway. If they went to Revelation 14 and found how many angels were there, they wouldn't have said, now he's coming. At the first angel's message. Now, let us read down then in Zechariah chapter 1, verse 12.
Then the angel of the Lord answered and said, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou not have mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah?
Do you see what? They were saying Christ should come. Where were they? Were they in Jerusalem? When we were starting yesterday, we saw where the kingdom is going to be established in Israel, in Jerusalem. But these ones, where was William Mill? Was in Jerusalem. Now they are saying, we have walked through and the whole earth. Now we are ready for Christ to come. But they're saying, but the world is sitting still. Nothing has happened.
It's at rest.
When Christ didn't come, that's when they proclaimed, it is at rest. Christ didn't come. But look at how wrong they were. We have found how wrong. That event was really wrong. The timing of the 2300 was correct for the entering of Christ in the Holy of Holies. It was wrong for the coming of Christ on earth. Because what was making it wrong? Revelation 14 has already showed us it was first angel's message. So they were cutting short all the 5 angels' messages. They only had 1. First angel's message, and they wanted Christ to come. And now we are even seeing somewhere the 3rd angel's message, they want Christ to come. What about the other 2? Now, the other thing that made them wrong again, they were not even keeping this feast at the right place where they said the voice shall come out of Zion. That's where they're supposed to expect Christ to come, when they are now people are going to wait for him in Zion by keeping the feasts. Where the 144,000 were seen on Mount Zion, now they were on the correct location to proclaim that now he's about to come. But where was William Miller and his associates? They were not even keeping these feasts. But fortunate, they were knowing the timings and the countings of God, because it was now, they were expecting Christ to enter the Holy of Holies when? In a feast. Day of Atonement, which is the 10th day of the 7th month. At least they were better off in the counting. That's why we should know also the times of God when he's saying this was the 11th month. They were knowing, they were acquainted with the times. Though it was changed in the Dark Ages, but at least they knew that the 10th day of the 7th month was on the 22nd of October, 1844. They were at least better than when I say to you, when are you going for a camp meeting? And you say on the 8th month of the Gregorian, which is August. And yet the camp meeting is on the 15th day of the 7th month in the biblical counting, which is in October. So they had not put their faith in accordance with the counting of the Bible, which will make them ready for the coming of Christ. Because what are these times making us ready to do? If you can go to a Great Controversy, page 399. Right?
These types.
Yeah.
These types were fulfilled not only as to the event,
right,
but as to the time.
Right. So the time is important. So that time, their knowing the time was really important. They knew it's unto 2,300 days, and they knew it was the 10th day of the 7th month, but they saw it was the coming of Christ. But actually, the entering of Christ in the Holy of Holies was the 10th day of the 7th month. But where they were expecting Christ was in spring. Spring is in the first feast, which is the Passover, which is somewhere in March. That's where they were disappointed. But when Christ entered the Holy of Holies is the 10th day of the 7th month, which is the Day of Atonement. So you see, they were knowing these times of the feasts. That's why Great Controversy says these. What was important was not only the event of the Passover or of the Day of Atonement, but also the time. That's why on that time, when the 10th day of the 7th month, where the priest was officiating as a Day of Atonement on earth, Christ entered also in the Holy of Holies on the same date and time. So the time was important. Now, we'll go to the next paragraph there.
In like manner.
Yes.
In like manner,
the
types which relate to the second advent
right.
must be fulfilled at the time pointed out in the
symbolic service. Now, we are talking about the coming of Christ. In like manner, the time of his second advent is already pointed in that timing of this feast, symbolic service. That's why there is a cry in the last days for you and I to keep the feast. Because in like manner, the types which point to the second advent of coming of Christ. Now you see, William Miller, they were expecting the coming of Christ in spring, in the time of the Passover feast. Now instead, Christ entered the Holy of Holies on the 10th day of the 7th month in another feast, Day of Atonement. Now here we are being told by Sister White in Great Controversy 399 that even the second coming of Christ is in another feast or in the symbolic service. So that's why the call comes in the last days for you and I to keep those feasts so that you meet the coming of Christ. Now go back to Zechariah. Now here is in verse 12, chapter 1, Zechariah. Verse 12, it says, Then the angel of the Lord answered and said, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou not have mercy on Jerusalem? Why is that question on Jerusalem for those who have missed the coming of Christ in 1844? Why is that question being asked? Because they knew Christ will be coming to establish the kingdom in Jerusalem. Now these people are expecting for Christ to come when they are still out there in the Gentile country. They haven't even started the 3 times a year keeping of the feast, because all those times were abolished. That's why we saw Paul yesterday. We saw Paul hastening to go to Jerusalem on a feast. This is what they used to do. Yeah? Is it correct? That's what they were doing. Let's see where the early Christian churches, well after the cross, keeping these feasts in Jerusalem. Because William Miller were not doing that. But they were expecting the coming of Christ. When they had not resumed all that, it was all abolished in the Dark Ages. These early Christians, that's what they were doing. 3 times a year they were going to worship God in Jerusalem. Now, you've got the first one.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Acts 20 verse 6.
Acts 20 verse 6.
And we sailed
Mm-hmm.
away from Philippi
Right.
after the days of the unleavened bread,
Right?
and came unto them to Troas in 5 days, where we abode 7 days.
Right?
Verse 16.
Do you see what they were doing?
After unleavened bread.
It was the feast of unleavened bread. They were now going to sail to Troas. So you see, they were keeping, which one? The other one. Give us the
Verse
other
16.
one. Yeah, verse 16.
For Paul
Mm.
had determined to
Mhm.
sail by Ephesus,
Right?
because he would not spend time in Asia,
Mm-hmm.
for he hasted, if it were possible for him, to be at Jerusalem the day of Pentecost.
So you see what the early Christians had been introduced by Christ when he left them. They were Feast of Pentecost in Jerusalem. Then after that, went back to their work in Asia. Feast of Tabernacle in Jerusalem. Then after that, back to their work. So all that 3 times a year was a continuation of the law which was instituted in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 16. Go to Deuteronomy 16, verse 16.
Verse 16.
Mm-hmm.
3 times in a year shall
Right.
all thy males appear before the Lord thy God,
Right?
in the place which he shall choose,
Mm-hmm.
in the feast of unleavened bread,
1.
and in the feast of weeks,
Right?
and in the feast of tabernacles.
Right?
And they shall not appear before the
Who
Lord
made that
empty.
law? All the males appear before me in the feast of unleavened bread. So you see, Paul was saying they were hastening after keeping the feast of unleavened bread. They were going to work in Asia, and then after that it comes 50 days, the feast of Pentecost. On the feast of Pentecost, back again. Then next, when on the feast of Tabernacle, back again. This is how the early Christians were left practicing their faith when Christ went to heaven. Now, those times were abolished. We saw it in Daniel chapter 7, verse 25. They were abolished in the Dark Ages. The times and laws and festivals were abolished. But now we see the first reformer, which is William Miller, starting a reformation up to 2,300 days. What is he preparing for? He's preparing people to receive the first ages message of what? Of knowing these times. But instead, he thought it was because it was under 2,300 days shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So to him, the sanctuary being cleansed was the coming of Christ on earth. So God allowed him, because already in the prophets in Revelation chapter 10, where he says, go and prophesy again. And it was sweet as honey in the mouth and bitter. Already God had warned him through Revelation chapter 10 that it's going to be bitter in the belly, or it warned him that there's going to be a disappointment because you missed the point. God allowed that. Now, they were now thinking it was the coming of Christ, but it was the starting of this reformation which will lead to the going of people to keep the feast as Paul and other disciples were doing in Jerusalem. So that's why in verse 12 he's asking, then the angel of the Lord saying to William Miller, he says, answered the Lord, saying, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou not have mercy in Jerusalem? These people had, the wife in Revelation chapter 12, the wife was given eagle's wings to fly into the wilderness to hide from the persecution which was happening in Jerusalem. Because initially that's where the headquarters was. So God this angel is asking, so how long then? Because they were supposed only to stay for 1,260 days in the wilderness, where they established the headquarters in America and everywhere. They were supposed the headquarters to be there for only 1,260 days, according to Revelation 12. But nobody has gone back. That's why the angel was asking William Miller, we have finished 1,260 years. Dark Ages, he has finished. So what are you still doing there? This is what we want to go back, as all the early Christian churches were doing. They were back. The headquarters should go back where the voice of God will be uttered on Mount Zion. We saw it in Revelation, in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2, saying, in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's house, people will flock in the top of the hills. We saw it. Isaiah 2, verse 2. It will be in the top of the hills. So that's why he's asking William Miller, in short, he's saying, we will not come, Christ is not coming until that worship which was being done by Peter, Paul, and whatever, of keeping the feast 3 times a year, where? In Jerusalem. So he said, how long wilt thou not have mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which thou hast had indignation these 70 years? Which are these 70 years? Those are the times of the dark ages. God had taken the headquarters out to run away from the persecutions, from the pagans who were now persecuting them, saying, now if you have to be a Christian, you have to keep the laws that we have changed. So the woman fled into the wilderness. The headquarters were allowed to be established in America then. But then they were supposed to sit, it was unto 260 days. The woman will be nourished there, fed, meaning given the gospel there. But after that period, should be given the gospel upon the top of the mountain or the hills, or upon Zion, where the law should proceed from the Mount Zion. That's why when Christ comes and gathers the 144,000, he's not there with the 144,000 in the wilderness. He's with the 144,000 in Mount Zion, where the headquarters should be by that time. Now here we are being told, how long then this indignation? The indignation was the coming of the pagans to make sure the woman fled from the headquarters, which was in Jerusalem. Now he's saying, how long? Because God enjoys when the headquarters of his message is in the place where we saw yesterday how the place was geographically built. He says it is a country where the eyes of the Lord are there from the beginning of the year to the... That's where his eyes are. So he wants his headquarters there where the eyes are. So he's saying, how long will you be worshiping me without going where the headquarters should be? This is why he didn't come. It was too early for him to come. The Reformation it was just starting. It hadn't been finished. When it's finished, the church should be exactly the same as what Paul and Peter were seeing. When Christ left, he established the Elocution church. It should be like that. That's why in Zechariah chapter 6, which we were learning yesterday, we saw 2 brass mountains. The first brass mountain being the Elocution church, the last brass mountain being the church triumphant, all at the same place. Now here, go to, proceed to 1 TG 11, space 7 and point 4. Start where it says, the prophet Jeremiah.
The prophet Jeremiah's prediction that the Jews were to spend 70 years in Babylonian captivity.
Did we see Jeremiah prophesying that when they were sent to Babylon for 70 years, it was supposed to be 70 years. Why was it 70 years? It was because of the Sabbath that they transgressed. They amounted to 70 years. It is there in Jeremiah. So that was a prediction that they will be for 70 years. There, right. Let's read it.
The prophet Jeremiah's prediction that the Jews were to spend 70 years in Babylonian captivity had ended, although they were still in Babylon.
Right? Did you see? The 70 years finished. But what happened? They were still there. Why? Now, the 1,260 years of the Dark Ages, where the woman was given eagle's wings to fly into the wilderness, Revelation 12 says that, finished a long time ago. Why are they still there? Because the type they remained there even when their time was up. 70 years finished, they're still there. So what is the antitype? 70 years finished, they're still there. They are 1,260 years finished, they're still there. This is what happened. Now let's read.
But since this symbolical prophecy finds its fulfillment in our day, instead of Zechariah's day, the angel's plea for mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, therefore, finds its direct application in this day. There is, however, this parallel. The time of the Babylonian captivity overlapped some years in the time of returning to Jerusalem. In like manner, John's prediction that the church should return to the vineyard after having spent 1,260 years in the wilderness in the lands of the Gentiles had ended and even overlapped since the year 1798.
Why didn't he come? They were still there when the time was. William Miller was predicting that Christ should come, but did not realize they are still in the wilderness. They were supposed to be back. They were supposed to be back already. So, like the time, they spent 70 years in Babylon. Instead of going back, they were still there, stuck. Right? And
there was no sign as yet for her returning.
Now, here is saying, if the people of there in that paragraph, if the people of God had gone to work as they should have gone to work right after Minneapolis meeting in 1888, the world could have been warned in 2 years and the Lord would have come. This is a quotation from General Conference Bulletin 1892. It says, if the coming of A.T. Jones and Waggoner to give the ceremonial law in 1888, so that there is 2 laws to be a schoolmaster, right? If they took that message from A.T. Jones in 1888, they could only have worked for 2 years. And then Christ would have come. That's General Conference Bulletin 1892. It says they could, if they received A.T. Jones and Wagoner's message of ceremonial law, because they were bringing, if you want to know more about it, because I'm finding some people say, oh, these 2 guys were preaching about righteousness by faith. They don't actually know that these were bringing the law in Galatians chapter 3 verse 24, which is saying this law was the schoolmaster. And they're asking Sister White in book 1, it's selected messages 233, is asking Sister White, which one is the schoolmaster? And Sister White is answering them, that is both the moral law and the ceremonial law. This is what A.T. Jones and Wagoner brought. If they received that, then the church was going to attain righteousness by faith, and they were only going to be allowed to preach for 2 years, and Christ was coming. But because we rejected in 1888, then it has gone up to our time. That message is going to be fulfilled by us. Those who are going to accept these 2 laws in our time will be allowed to fulfill that prophecy of Zechariah chapter 1. Now here, this message now
positively declares that her wilderness sojourn is about to end, and that soon will she stand on Mount Zion with the Lamb. From this analytical point of view, is again seen that the angel's plea for mercy on Jerusalem and the cities of Judah is applicable directly to the people in our day, and only indirectly to the people in Zechariah's day.
Now, so when Christ didn't come in 1844, Christ was, the angel asked, how long should you not have mercy on Jerusalem? What was this mercy? Should the people not come and restore the worship that Christ had instituted in Jerusalem? That these people, the early Christian churches, were our example. They were an example of how we should worship God. They were going for their feast in Jerusalem. Now, so what is the prediction? Let's continue to verse 13.
Verse 13. And the Lord answered the angel that talked with me with good words and comfortable words. So the angel that communed with me said unto me, Cry thou, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I am jealous for Jerusalem,
right?
And for Zion with a great jealousy.
I am jealous. Why God was jealous? Because that worship, what Christ instituted the worship of Deuteronomy 16 verse 16, where people will go 3 times a year to worship and keep these 3 feasts, like what the early Christians were doing. But this has been dissolved by the woman who fled to the wilderness because the laws were being changed into paganism. Now God is saying, right, so what about what I instituted in Deuteronomy 16 verse 16? 3 times a year shall all thy males appear in the feast of Passover, in the feast of Pentecost, in the feast of Unleavened. That's why in Acts chapter 2, they were there. They were still doing that. 50 days after Christ had long been on the cross and had gone back to heaven, on the day of Pentecost, they were all coming from all different ways. Let's hear Acts chapter 2. We know, we read it yesterday, but there are some people who might say, where is it? Where is it? We know because dullness has come into our reigns. Dullness is very dull. People are dull. And some make themselves dull. They hear a verse over and over and over and say, well, don't even, the verse is not saying that. The verse is not making yourself dull. So that because the verse is not going along with your thinking, so you think it's not saying that. Now, let's go to Acts chapter 2. On the day of Pentecost, it's one of the feasts. Because they said on the feast of Passover, on the feast of Pentecost, on the feast of Tabernacle. Now let's see on the Pentecost. On that time, Christ had already gone back to heaven. And the early Christians were assembled there. Right, let's hear.
And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place.
Right.
And suddenly...
What brought them to one place? Wherever have you seen those who worship the Christians being at one place? Because the first people to be Christians were the Jews. The very Peters and what, they were all Jews. They were following Christ. And they became Christians. These are the first Christians. They were coming from all over in the Christian era. Now he says, on the day of Pentecost, which is 50 days from Passover, that's the day of Pentecost. They were all assembled at one place. Where were they coming from? Verse 5.
And they were dwelling at Jerusalem, Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven.
Right. So God is saying actually to William Miller, you are expecting Christ to come in 1844. But God is jealous about Jerusalem. Why? About the worship he instituted in Jerusalem of people going 3 times a year. So if William Miller and his associates had received the coming of Christ in that year in 1844, what chaos was that? Who was now going to teach them how to worship God 3 times a year? Who was going to do that? So God has to wait for us to finish the whole Reformation as it was changed in Dark Ages and bring it back to what it was when Christ left the early Christian church. We have to go back to that state first. Then Christ shall come. Before that, he won't come. We need to be there in that symbolic service, counting, and in the feast that Christ instituted in Jerusalem to the early Christian churches. In the proper time where he ate the Lord's Supper at night. Someone said we can't eat the Lord's Supper at night because they are thieves at night and whatever. Let me tell you one thing. Don't find hooks to hang your doubts, and because even in Israel, they took the Passover, the Lord's Supper at night. And you are telling me that because it's at night they are thieves, but look, you are going to theaters, cinemas, and everything at night. Where are these thieves? It's just a statement to denounce the message only. So we have to take it during the day, because we can't say people should know. An actual fact, who told you that it should be kept in the church? Because when Christ ate the Lord's Supper, it was in somebody's house. When it was instituted in Exodus chapter 12, it was each family to partake of the lamp. The lamp was sorted out according to the size of the family. Exodus chapter 12. Read the whole chapter and you see that is the Lord's Supper. It was in our homes at exactly the time prescribed, at night, on the 14th day at evening. So why would you waste time going to unite with other people and exposing yourself to the thieves when you're supposed to take it in your home at night? Christ took it. He had to find someone to tell somebody, which house can we go and he was not saying which temple. No, which house. So you complicate things for yourself. So here, verse 14 is saying, and the Lord answered the angel and talked with me with good words and comfortable words. So the angel that communed with me said unto me, cry thou, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, I'm jealous. That's why he didn't come. I'm jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion with a great jealous. Why? Because the worship he instituted in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 16 to 3 times a year is not being done. It has been dissolved in the Dark Ages, because the early Christians, well after the cross, they were still having that. Now, William Miller wants Christ to come, but God is still jealous. He wants that worship back. Now you see people going 3 times a year. God is happy. The worship is being reached under 2,300. It should be instituted back. Now, 1 TG 11 space 8, third paragraph.
Rather than saying, Zion shall be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps, the Lord expressed his great jealousy for them, and commanded his servants to cry yet and say, therefore thus saith the Lord, I am returned to Jerusalem with mercies.
Now, read from verse 17 again, right? What in verse 17? Because here we have seen, verse 16 to 17 on Zechariah chapter 1, right?
Therefore, thus saith the Lord, I am returned to Jerusalem with mercies.
Right.
My house shall be built in it, saith the Lord of hosts.
Right.
And a line shall be stretched forth upon Jerusalem.
Right.
Cry yet, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, my cities through prosperity shall yet be spread abroad, and the Lord shall yet comfort Zion, and shall yet choose Jerusalem.
Again. No. This is in 1844. He hasn't come. And he says, why? He says, I'm jealous of Jerusalem. William Miller was expecting him to come, but he said, no, I'm jealous of Jerusalem. And he cry aloud and say, the Lord shall yet choose Jerusalem again. Why? Because the woman is still in the wilderness. And the persecution which was happening in Jerusalem is long finished. But the woman doesn't want to come back. Now let me tell you one thing, William Miller. Jerusalem is going to be chosen by God again. What is he saying? He will, part of the 2,300 days that William Miller was reading was to restore back the worship which was belonging to God alone. Where? In Jerusalem. How? 3 times a year shall your males appear. Yeah? In the feast of the Passover, in the feast of Pentecost, in the feast of Tabernacle, in the holy city, in Jerusalem. That's why in one of the feasts we see Christ standing with 144,000 on Mount Zion. Where? In Jerusalem. Because it was a continuation of what people have already started 3 times a year. So in 1844, he restored back. Christ went back and said, I'm returned to Jerusalem. So who is there now? Jerusalem. It's Christ. Why is he returned? To restart this 3 times a year for you and me to go and worship him in Jerusalem. And when that is started, then you are now going to be ready to stand with Christ on Mount Zion. And we see for sure the 144,000 standing with Christ on Mount Zion for the first time. These are the first fruits. To be given marching orders. To go back now to the Gentile countries. To get all, yesterday we were talking about the gathering process. To gather all the processes of the Gentiles. To come now and stand when Christ is there in Jerusalem. So he's actually telling Miller, now if I am to come, as you're expecting me to come, where will I, when I sit, when he is coming now, he's going to sit. He's not coming in the clouds now. He's going to sit in Jerusalem. Let's see it. Matthew chapter 25, verse 31. So he wouldn't do that when William Miller was still outside. Those who were expecting his coming were outside. He will come to meet them when they're inside. That's why he comes to join the 144,000 on Mount Zion. William Miller wouldn't do that and his associates. We see only those who meet him when he comes are the 144,000, the firstly sealed saints from the house of God. They are standing with him on Mount Zion. This is what led with the group of William Miller in 1833. They were only to start the Reformation. And next Sister White joins them to reform the Sabbath days. And then they also continue with the Reformation of making the sanctuary cleansed, or the sanctuary laws back. Which were the sanctuary laws? These feasts. Right? Now, I gave you something.
Matthew 25.
25, yeah? How is he coming?
When the Son of Man shall come in his glory,
right?
And all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory,
right?
And before him shall be gathered all nations,
right?
And he shall separate them one from another.
Now, when he comes in his glory, he's not yet coming to collect anyone. He will sit now. That's one of the feasts. When these 144,000 go to take all the Gentile forces, they are in front of him. It's not yet time to go to heaven, because now he's still able to speak to those who are not, who are God's in the left hand. We say, I was sick, you never visited me. I was thirsty, I was hungry, you never. He's talking to those who are. These are the Gentile forces. That's why there are so many who are working for Christ. How do they work for Christ? Making sure the sick are healed, the hungry are fed. Do you see, when there is famine, charitable organizations start. Who is making them start? It's Christ. They start to feed the hungry. Each time you go on TV, you find somebody is being advertised is struggling, and somebody has been, the bowels have been moved to say, let's help that person. They are working for the kingdom. That's why I say, I was sick. You didn't give me anything. You didn't heal me. I was hungry. You didn't feed me. I was thirsty. You didn't give me a cup of drink. So it's these Gentiles, he's talking to them. And he says, some to the left, some to the right, who fulfilled that charitable organization. They are working already. They are very far from us. When the 144,000 are completely sealed, they are going to collect everyone, and he will separate them according to what their works were like. They were feeding the hungry. They were taking those who were sick. They were visiting those who were in prison. They were doing all those. All these works are the one that God was going to consider. They are working for God. So he says to those in the right, come, inherit the kingdom. Listen to what he says. come, inherit the kingdom. So you see, it's the kingdom which has started. He is in the kingdom. He is separating them while ruling in the kingdom. And when we say the kingdom is established before we go to heaven, do you really get that? Because he can't speak to anyone when we are now about to go to the clouds. When he just comes, he doesn't speak to anyone. He only takes those who are holy to heaven. And those who are not are killed by the brightness of his coming. But here, this coming, is able to say, I was sick. I was what? I was what? He's talking to those. Here, you come, you enter in the kingdom. You have to understand what is happening. So at that time then, when he comes, he is meeting the 144,000 on Mount Zion. It is now in the day of Pentecost, on that day when they are. That's why Sister White was saying, these symbolic services, the coming of Christ will be according to those. They are appointed by these times. We are seeing Christ on Mount Zion on the day of Pentecost, with the latter rain being poured on the 144,000. To do what? To do a work of what? Of collecting these Gentiles. To come now and say, you to the left, you to the right, you to those on the right, enter in the kingdom. Who is doing that work? The first fruits of the servants, which are sealed from the house of God, the 144,000. Now you know why they are being sealed. We are not sealed to go to heaven. You don't need that to go to heaven. We are sealed to be empowered with the knowledge. And when we are empowered with the knowledge, we are able now confidently to go and proclaim it everywhere. That's the sealing process. That's the work of the sealing process, to go and be sealed as servants, to work when Christ shall come. So he's not collecting saints yet. You're waiting for 666. That will never come unless Christ stands in the kingdom. Then the 666 starts. Yeah? So we are waiting for something that will come as a delayed match to you. Because you could have been fortifying yourself in the sealing process. That's why we come even on a Sunday to say, let's study this one. Yeah, let's study this one. And we still have Tuesday. Today is 21. Tomorrow is what? 22 and 23, which is Tuesday. It's a new moon. So it means we have another Sabbath on Tuesday. We have another lesson. To those who are able to listen, they will fortify. On each new moon, there is a new meal. There is a new fruit. We have a new moon on Tuesday. So all these days are Sabbaths. When we are in heaven, on one new moon to another, on one Sabbath to another. We continue here. We are practicing what is in the kingdom. These are the days that are kept in the kingdom. And these are there in the Bible. Where we worship on Sabbath, it's there in the Bible. Where we worship on new moon, it's there in the Bible. Yeah? It says no several work. It says so. Like it says to Sabbath, no several work. Same thing. Only if it is the very elect chosen by God, sealed in the sealing process, they will boldly, because it's the Spirit of God which gives them the boldness in worshiping God. And when God sends you, He will send you to be bold in His laws. Yeah? Now here we have seen, therefore say to William Miller, God has chosen Jerusalem again. So when does God come back to Israel, to His country? He came back in 1844 to reinstitute. After the laws were, someone say, oh yeah, the Sabbath has kept since creation and whatever. So it's since creation and up to our time. There was no interruption. Someone, is it what you are telling me? So what was the Dark Ages doing? Interrupting the worship of God. Changing those Sabbath to another day. Do you really believe it happened? So if the Sabbath was changed, and we've changed back, the worship of God, the feasts were also what? Changed. We put them back. The worship of God, which was ordained by God, which was happening in Jerusalem, in the place where He is looking from the beginning of the year to the end. That's what he said in Deuteronomy chapter 11. From the beginning of the year to the end. He's watching that place. That's where his headquarters was. But he put the headquarters aside so that the persecution finishes. And the persecution, which was there in Dark Ages, is long finished. He wants it back. He wants it back. And those who respond by putting it back are on the program of heaven. Now here, go to 1 TG 11, space 9.1.
Since the light on these prophecies is now shining on our pathway for the first time since Zechariah wrote them, and since the message is now being broadcasted throughout Laodicea, the truth that the Lord at long last has returned, the mercies is very obvious.
So that mercy is obvious. Are there people going to worship God according to how Paul and Peter and early Christians and all those in the Old Testament were doing? Are they? Yes. The mercy. We have received the mercy. And Jerusalem has received the mercy. Yeah? Right. In Zechariah. Right. In Zechariah, let's go to continue it in verse 18.
Then lifted I up mine eyes, and saw, and behold, 4 horns.
Right.
And I said unto the angel that talked with me, What be these?
Right.
And he answered me, These are the horns which have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem.
We were talking about, in Ezekiel chapter 36, we're talking about the 10 tribes being scattered in all the world. We saw them being scattered, isn't it? But we are being told that they are horns which did that. So then lifted I mine eyes, and saw, behold, 4 horns. And I said unto the angel that talked with me, What be these? And he answered me, These are the horns which have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. So when they were scattered, it's the horns that did that. Now let's hear in timely greetings in 1 TG 11, space 10.4. Right? 10.4.
Anciently, the kingdom of Israel occupied the northern portion of the promised land.
Right.
And the kingdom of Judah occupied the southern portion of it. The former was scattered by the kings of Assyria, and the latter by the king of Babylon.
Right.
Those who returned to Jerusalem in the days of Zechariah were from the kingdom of Judah, the Jews. But as the kingdom of Israel was assimilated by the nations, it consequently lost its racial and nationality and national identity.
So we know that the 10 tribes were occupying the northern part of Israel, and the 2 tribes, because they were all rent in twain in the time of Solomon. So the 10 tribes were in the northern section. The 2 tribes were in the 2 tribes of Judah were in the southern. So the south, the king of Babylon, who was at Nebuchadnezzar, and then the northern one by the king of Assyria. And these ones never came back. Who came back after Babylonian captivity? Those who were taken by Nebuchadnezzar, which are the 2 tribes, they are the ones who went back to Jerusalem. So even up until Christ came the first time, he only found the Jews who were in Babylon, who were taken by the king of Babylon. But those who were scattered by the 10 tribes, who were scattered by Assyria on the south, on the northern side, they are scattered all over until today. These are the 10 tribes. But we see them emanating when the sealing process is begun, and they are found first because they lost their racial identity. So they are found first in the first sealing process. And those who are sealed from the house of God, then we find there are 12 tribes of Israel. Right? First, and the 144,000 are coming from those. Right? But who scattered them first? It's the 4 horns from God. That's the power that scattered them first. Now, it says the very 4 horns are the powers that will take them back. Now, verse 20.
Verse 20. And the Lord shewed me 4 carpenters. Then said I, What come these to do? And he spake, saying, These are the horns which have scattered Judah, so that no man did lift up his head. But these are come to fray them, to cast out the horns of the Gentiles, which lifted up their horn over the land of Judah to scatter it.
Here, let's hear Tamil greetings. 11.11.2.
Here, the same powers which scattered Judah and Israel are again seen not as horns, but as carpenters.
Right. So first, initially, we saw them as horns, and now we are seeing them as carpenter. A carpenter is something coming to make sure everything, it's like building. Yeah.
Not to scatter God's people, but to build for them and to cast out the horns of the Gentiles, those who rule the land. Plainly then, on one hand, the nations which do not rule Palestine arise to arise as horns against those who rule it, and on the other hand, they are to rise as carpenters for the people of God. Thus will the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
Like it was in Luke chapter 21. What does Luke chapter 21 say? Luke 21 verse 24.
And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down by of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
So when the 10 tribes were taken off, what remained in Jerusalem? The Gentiles. They were taken out, the 10 tribes. Only the 2 tribes are there. But who occupied that space? The Gentiles. So let them tread the holy city. This is what happened, right? Now, when judgment starts in the house of God, we see the 144,000 now going back to their land. Because that worship has been restored back as God prescribed it from the beginning. This is how God had prescribed his people when he created them, so that they continue worshiping in front of him always. So we can't remain away from him when he has got somewhere. Even when we are living in our countries, is every home a church? Is it there's somewhere where we go to a church, isn't it? But when we are in our homes, we are in our homes. But there's somewhere where we should be going. We are practicing that we are in our countries like this. But when we want to meet God, there's somewhere where we should go and meet him. And he had already done that by making sure 3 times a year we go to meet him. Every feast, which is the Feast of Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacle, somewhere there, and then we finish, we come to our homes. Right? Like we do when we go to church once a week, and we come back to our homes. There's somewhere where we have to meet him. Now, let's continue. Go to Timely Greetings 11, space 12, first paragraph.
Okay. Then these guileless servants of God,
the 144,000,
the first fruits, are to be sent to the nations that have not heard of God's fame. Right.
After we are there as 144,000, we are now going to be sent back to the nations. Where now? Not to the house of God, but to the Gentiles. Right? Let's see them going back. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 66, verse 16.
For by fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh.
Right?
And the slain of the Lord shall be many.
It will be in conjunction with the time of the Passover, where we saw when they walked out of Egypt, there was a slaughter of the firstborns first. Now, in the time of our Passover, which is the antitype, there will be also where Ezekiel chapter 9 verse 4 says, Go ye and slay utterly old and young, but not go near any with a sign. as the type was in Egypt, when Christ shall come. So at this very time, the 144,000 escape that slaughter and then are sent all over to collect the Gentiles, Gentile forces. Now the time is come for the message to go out into the Gentile countries. Like it was when it was preached. When Christ woke up, he gave them power to preach first to Judea, to the Israelites. And they are the ones who first occupied the Christian world. Remember when the day of Pentecost? On the day of Pentecost, it was only 3,000 were baptized. These were all coming to from the Jewish forces. And they continued in verse 46 in chapter 2 of Acts. He said they continued daily. And God continued to add into the church every time that the gospel was being preached into the Jewish nations. But after Stephen was killed by Paul in AD 34, then the gospel was now extended to the Gentile forces. Now that is a type as an antitype in our time. It is starting with the house of God. And after Christ has come with the 144,000, it is extended to the Gentile nations. And then they are taken. That's what we see in Isaiah chapter 66, verse 18. Go to verse 18. Mm-hmm.
Verse 18.
Mm-hmm.
For I know their works and their thoughts. It shall come that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory.
Right? So now the Gentiles are being, Christ is sending the 144,000 to the Gentile world. Now to bring them, gathering all nations like it was there. Verse 19.
And I will set a sign among them, and I will send those that escape of them unto the nations,
right?
To Tarshish,
Pool,
and Lud, that draw the bow, to Tubal,
right?
to Javan,
right?
to the isles afar off, that have not heard of my fame, neither have seen of my glory.
Right?
And they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles.
Do you see now it's the time the message goes to the Gentiles? And what happens then?
And they shall bring all your brethren for an offering unto the Lord out of all the nations,
right?
Upon horses.
The transport is provided,
and
horses,
in chariots,
and
in litters,
and
in mules, and upon swift beasts,
right? Where
to my holy mountain Jerusalem.
They are not going to heaven yet. Now go into this. Now people are getting ready. This is what God was saying to William Miller. You wouldn't have come with the first angel's message. All this was supposed to be ready in place. When he comes, he will send those who are ready to. So if Miller and his associates were found by Christ in the Gentile countries, so what about this prophecy? How was it going to be fulfilled? So that's why I say, I'm jealous of Jerusalem. Why you want Christ to come 1844? I'm jealous of Jerusalem. And I've come to Jerusalem again. And I've chosen it again. But you want Christ to come in 1844. You understand? This is why Christ didn't come in 1844. Instead was going into Holy of Holies to prepare. Though the time he comes, there should be now associates which are like Miller. We are in the Reformation, who are already now keeping these 3 times, and Christ now comes to join. Now it's well arranged. It's a proper arrangement according to the prophecies of the prophets who were talking all over. Yesterday we studied. All the prophets were talking about this gathering. But William Miller now wanted, it's not yet ready. The gathering was not yet ready. But now the gathering is ready. He comes, he joins the 144,000, send them. Tarshish, Pool, Lud. Now it's happening according to the design of the verses in the prophecies. The prophets had already prescribed. So William Miller should have read not only Daniel, should have read all these prophecies that we are, so that he knows, no, it's too early. It's too early for the coming of Christ. This incident, the 2,300 days, is correct, but the incident is not it. The incident was Christ going into Holy of Holies, preparing for what? For this incident of 3 times a year. And when he comes, he joins those who are in the 3 times a year. He sends also to the Gentiles to come also 3 times a year. right? If it's not in your curriculum or in your church manual, revise it. Revise it, because that's the problem of writing those church manuals. Because when the scroll is unrolled, it's something that is not yet in your manual. So you should be editing it all the time and involving all these things. But the trend is that the devil wants people not to miss the target. So he makes sure the church manual is all that editing back, and all the scroll is opening up, and you are not editing. So you are left behind. And left behind. Already people have been left behind in the third angel's message. When people are supposed to be preaching the fifth one, they are still in the third. Why? It's not in the manual. It's not in the manual. That's the problem of copying and the writing, of rewriting the Bible. You shouldn't be rewriting it. The manual should be the Bible itself. Yeah? So you don't add, you don't subtract. That's why I said that person who is going to subtract or add will have all the time of the troubles that are written in the book of Revelation. That's the last thing on chapter 22. Don't subtract. Don't add. Take the Bible as it is. Follow it. And the people are coming smart, thinking they are very smart and rewriting it. Now we have designed what we should. No. Take the Bible as it is and follow it. Once you don't do that, then so many people will start reforming, because some other topics have not been involved. Some other points that are life-saving have not been involved. So you have to involve them. Otherwise you miss the point. Right? So here we are seeing they are going to be taken. He sent the 144,000 and to my holy mountain, Jerusalem. Did you go up to verse 20? Yeah. So they are coming in litters, in chariots. There's still transport to be provided. If it's not mentioning about the establishment of the kingdom, as I'm saying, so what does that chapter mean to you? What does it mean? Right? So, read also from volume 3, T 3T 253, right?
It is difficult. That one.
Mm-hmm.
It is difficult.
It says, bind to this the truth
3T.
of the great day, of the great and dreadful day. Anyway, it's the point that we have just been saying. If you can't find it, go to TG again, 11.12.
Point 1.
I'm trying to see whether we can revise the points that are, because we have to wind off this lesson.
Okay, so we'll go on 12.1.
Yeah, on 11.13 TG. We are therefore.
Okay. Mm-hmm. We are therefore not to worry about a possibility of anyone's hurting the work of the God.
Mm-hmm.
Neither are we to worry about how we are to get to Mount Zion,
mm-hmm.
but are to make sure to be ready to board the chariot of God when the angels cry out, all aboard.
Mm-hmm.
Let us ever remember that those who once wrecked the ancient kingdom and cast out its people,
mm-hmm.
shall now come to build it up and to cast out the horns of the Gentiles who now rule the land.
Mm-hmm.
So even our enemies of yesterday, God puts working for us today.
Right. So it's the end of what we are saying. From 1833 up to our time, what should we be doing? This is the Reformation which God has been waiting for, which God wouldn't allow Christ to come in 1844 with those who were reforming. They had just started the Reformation, but they were supposed now to focus in the 3 times a year yearly feast, where God wants this kind of worship as he has prescribed in the Old Testament, as he did even the 10 Commandments is in the Old Testament. He wants us to continue it in this time, and this is the one that was interfered with in the Dark Ages by introducing pagan feasts, so that this worship is dissolved home and away, and nobody is saved. But God wants you and I to continue with the Reformation. And when God comes, we'll find you and I ready so that we start collecting all the Gentile forces to the kingdom, and the kingdom of God shall surely be established. Why can you and me work towards this kingdom? May God bless everyone while we study. And we also meet again on Tuesday on the new moon, on the starting of another month, which is a Sabbath, which is a day which God expects us to continue keeping according to how we will keep in the kingdom and in the new heaven and the new earth. God bless.